My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel, and it wasn't just from the cold. The blizzard had been relentless for the past 3 hours, turning what should have been a 7-hour drive into what was looking like a 10-hour nightmare through whiteout conditions. But I kept going because in my passenger seat sat the most beautiful wedding cake I'd ever created. 3 tiers of lavender and cream with hand-piped sugar flowers that had taken me 4 days to perfect. Every delicate detail was meant for my sister Brielle's wedding tomorrow, a surprise I'd been planning for months. The windshield wipers fought against the snow as I squinted through the darkness, my phone's GPS barely functioning in this weather. I'd left my bakery in Ohio at 6 in the morning, determined to make it to Brielle's rehearsal dinner in time. She had no idea I was coming. After our last conversation 3 weeks ago, where she'd casually mentioned she understood why I couldn't make it to her wedding, the distance, the expense, my struggling business, I'd made up my mind. I was going to prove that nothing could keep me away from the most important day of her life. My back ached from hunching over the wheel, and my eyes burned from staring into the snow, but every time I glanced at that cake, perfectly secured in its custom travel box, I felt a surge of determination. This was going to make everything right between us. All those years of feeling like the afterthought sister, the one who lived too far away, who couldn't afford the designer clothes or fancy vacations that Brielle's crowd expected, none of that would matter when she saw what I'd done for her. The radio crackled with weather warnings, but I turned it off. I couldn't handle hearing about road closures right now. I was almost there. Just 2 more hours, and I'd be walking into that rehearsal dinner with the surprise of a lifetime. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Vista, my entire body was trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. The elegant venue glowed warm against the snowy night, and I could see silhouettes moving behind the frosted windows of the private dining room. My heart hammered as I carefully lifted the cake box from the passenger seat, cradling it like a newborn. The weight of it felt substantial, reassuring, proof of everything I'd sacrificed to be here. I'd spent my last $400 on ingredients and gas money for this trip. My bakery was barely staying afloat, and I'd had to close for 3 days to make this cake and drive here, losing precious weekend business I desperately needed. But seeing the joy on Brielle's face would make it all worthwhile. She'd always been the golden child, the successful marketing executive with the perfect fiancé, the downtown condo, the designer, everything. Meanwhile, I was the sister who dropped out of college to chase a baking dream that was slowly crumbling around me. As I approached the entrance, balancing the cake box carefully, I could hear laughter and conversations spilling from inside. Through the glass doors, I caught glimpses of my family. Mom in her navy dress that she'd probably bought specially for this weekend, Dad looking uncomfortable in his good suit, and there was Brielle, radiant in what looked like a designer rehearsal outfit, surrounded by her bridesmaids. They all looked so polished, so put together, like they belonged in this upscale world of crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths. I paused at the door, suddenly self-conscious about my appearance. 10 hours of driving through a blizzard hadn't done me any favors. My hair was a mess, my jeans were wrinkled, and I probably smelled like car heater and stress sweat. But then I looked down at the cake box in my arms and straightened my shoulders. This wasn't about how I looked. This was about showing up, about proving that I belonged in this family moment. I was reaching for the door handle when I heard it. My name, spoken in Brielle's voice, floating through the slightly open window near the entrance. I froze, cake box still balanced in my arms, and found myself listening despite every instinct telling me to just walk inside. I mean, honestly, would have been nice if she never made it, Brielle was saying, and I could hear the familiar tone she used when she thought she was being witty. Can you imagine? Showing up here looking like she just crawled out of some small-town diner, probably with flour still under her fingernails. This whole weekend is supposed to be elegant, you know. I've spent months planning every detail. The laughter that followed hit me like a physical blow. Not just Brielle's laugh, but multiple voices. Mom's distinctive giggle, what sounded like her maid of honor Courtney, maybe even Dad's uncomfortable chuckle. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe, and for a moment I thought I might drop the cake right there on the snowy pavement. She probably would have brought some homemade disaster, too, Courtney's voice chimed in. Remember that birthday cake she made for your mom last year? It looked like something from a church bake sale. So embarrassing next to everything else we had catered. God, yes, Brielle continued, and I could picture her rolling her eyes the way she always did when talking about things she considered beneath her standards. I love her, obviously, but she just doesn't understand that not everything has to be this big DIY production. Some of us have moved beyond playing house in the kitchen. I'm actually relieved she can't make it. One less thing to worry about managing this weekend. The snow kept falling around me, but I felt completely numb. 3 weeks ago, when I'd told her I probably couldn't make it because of money and the distance, she'd been so understanding, so sweet about it. I totally get it, Mara, she'd said. Don't stress about it. There'll be other occasions. I'd thought she was being considerate of my situation. Turns out she was just relieved to not have to deal with her embarrassing sister at her perfect wedding. My hands were shaking now, but not from the cold. The cake box suddenly felt impossibly heavy, like it contained all my foolish hopes and desperate need for acceptance instead of sugar and flour. Something inside me snapped. Not broke. Snapped. Like a rubber band stretched too far, too long. I stood there in the snow, holding this masterpiece I'd poured my heart and savings into, listening to my own family laugh about how pathetic I was. The cake that had taken me 4 days to perfect, that I'd driven through a literal blizzard to deliver, that represented everything I was trying to rebuild after my divorce left me with nothing but a failing bakery and a mountain of debt. I looked down at the cake box, then at the warm glow of the restaurant where my family was celebrating without me, where they were celebrating because I wasn't there. The decision formed in my mind with crystal clarity, and for the first time in months, I felt completely sure about something. I walked to the entrance, pushed open the heavy glass door, and stepped into the warmth. The conversations died as heads turned toward me, and I watched the color drain from Brielle's face. She was sitting at the head of a long table, surrounded by her perfectly coordinated wedding party, and the expression that crossed her features was pure horror. Not surprise, not joy, horror. Mara. Mom's voice was tight with shock. What are you doing here? How did you— I drove, I said simply, walking straight to their table. My voice sounded remarkably steady, considering my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. 10 hours through the worst blizzard I've ever seen. Because I thought my sister's wedding was important enough to risk my life for. The silence in that room was deafening. I could see Dad shifting uncomfortably in his chair, Courtney staring at me with her mouth slightly open, and several other faces I recognized from family gatherings looking between me and Brielle like they were watching a tennis match. I set the cake box down on the table with deliberate care, right in front of Brielle. I brought you a wedding cake, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the quiet room. Custom design, 3 tiers, sugar flowers that took me 2 days to make by hand, cost me $400 I don't have, and 3 days of business I desperately needed. Brielle's face had gone from white to red, and she was opening and closing her mouth like she couldn't figure out what to say. Behind her, I could see other diners in the restaurant starting to notice the tension at our table. I heard what you said, I continued, and watched her face crumble completely. About how nice it would be if I never made it. About my embarrassing homemade disasters. The silence stretched until it became unbearable, and then Brielle found her voice. Mara, we didn't mean— you don't understand. We were just what? I cut her off, and my voice was louder now. Other diners were definitely staring, and I could see the restaurant manager hovering near the bar, clearly uncertain whether to intervene. Just laughing about how embarrassing I am? Just celebrating that your pathetic sister couldn't make it to ruin your perfect weekend? Mom tried to salvage the situation. Honey, you're taking this the wrong way. We were just... I'm taking it exactly the right way, I said, and suddenly I felt powerful in a way I hadn't in years. You want to know what's embarrassing? Driving 10 hours through a storm because you love your family so much, you'd risk everything to be there for them. You want to know what's pathetic? Spending money you don't have because you think making something beautiful with your own hands means something. Dad finally spoke up, his voice gruff with discomfort. Now, Mara, let's not make a scene. A scene? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. Dad, I just found out my entire family thinks I'm such an embarrassment that they're relieved when I can't show up to family events. I think we're way past worrying about scenes. Brielle was crying now, mascara starting to smudge under her eyes. Please, Mara, just sit down and we can talk about this. You're ruining everything. And there it was. Even now, even caught red-handed, her concern was for her ruined evening, not for the sisters she'd just humiliated. I looked around the table at all of them, Mom wringing her hands, Dad staring at his plate, Courtney and the other bridesmaids looking mortified, and Brielle crying prettily into her napkin like she was the victim here. You're right, I said quietly. I am ruining everything, just like you knew I would. I gestured to the cake box. There's your wedding cake. 3 tiers, buttercream roses, fondant detail work that took me 2 days. Everything you said you wanted when we talked about your dream wedding 5 years ago, before you decided I wasn't good enough to be part of it. I started backing toward the door, and I could feel every eye in the restaurant on me. Consider it my wedding gift, and my goodbye. The cold air hit me like a slap when I pushed through the door, but I kept walking. Behind me, I could hear Brielle calling my name, her voice high and desperate, but I didn't turn around. My hands were shaking again as I fumbled for my car keys, but this time it wasn't from cold or exhaustion. It was from the sheer overwhelming relief of finally standing up for myself. The drive home was a blur of tears and adrenaline. I had to pull over twice because I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road, sitting in my car at gas stations while the storm raged around me. But underneath the hurt and anger was something I hadn't felt in years: pride. I had stood up for myself. I had walked away from people who didn't value me, even though they were family. My phone started ringing before I even made it out of the city. Brielle's name flashed on the screen over and over again. Then Mom, then Dad, then Brielle again. I turned the phone off and drove in silence through the snow, replaying every word of that conversation I'd overheard, every shocked face around that table when I'd called them out. By the time I got home 18 hours later, I had 23 missed calls and 47 text messages. I sat in my kitchen, still in the same clothes I'd worn to drive there, and read through them all. Brielle's messages started angry. How could you embarrass me like that in front of everyone? Then shifted to defensive. You completely misunderstood what we were saying. And finally became desperate. Please call me back. You're my sister. We need to talk about this. Mom's texts were all about family unity and forgiveness. We're all upset right now, but we love you, and we need to work this out. Dad sent exactly one message. You made your point. Time to move on. But it was Courtney's single text that told me everything I needed to know about how that evening had ended. The cake was incredible. Everyone said so after you left. Brielle cried through the whole dinner. I stared at that message for a long time. So they'd eaten my cake. The cake I'd made with love and hope and desperation. The one Brielle had just called an embarrassing homemade disaster. They'd eaten it and admitted it was incredible, but only after I was gone. Only after they thought I'd never know. I deleted every message without responding to a single one. Then I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. I blocked all their numbers, every single one. Mom, Dad, Brielle, even Courtney and the extended family members who'd probably heard about the drama by now. The silence in my apartment was deafening, but it was also peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to approve of me, to include me, to make me feel like I mattered. I'd spent so long trying to earn their love and respect that I'd forgotten I didn't actually need it to survive. The wedding day arrived, and I knew it because my business phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. Numbers I didn't recognize, but I could guess who was behind them. When I finally answered one, thinking it might be a potential customer, Brielle's voice came through, shaky and desperate. "Mara, please, I know you blocked my number, but I'm borrowing someone's phone. Today is my wedding day, and I can't get married knowing you hate me. Please just talk to me for 5 minutes." I hung up without saying a word. She called back immediately. I turned the phone off. But something strange happened that day. Instead of spending it feeling guilty or sad like I'd expected, I threw myself into work with a focus I hadn't felt in months. I had 3 custom birthday cakes to finish and a consultation with a new client who'd found me through social media. Mrs. Henley, a sweet elderly woman planning her 50th anniversary party, spent 2 hours in my kitchen talking about flavors and designs, and when she left, she'd placed the biggest order I'd gotten all year. "I saw your work on Instagram," she'd said, admiring the photos on my phone of previous cakes. "That wedding cake you posted yesterday was absolutely stunning. The detail work on those sugar flowers was museum quality." I'd posted a picture of Brielle's cake the night before, after I'd gotten home. Not out of spite, just because I was proud of the work. It was the most beautiful cake I'd ever made, and I wasn't going to pretend it didn't exist just because of how the delivery had gone. By evening, that post had gotten more likes and comments than anything I'd ever shared. Professional bakers from across the country were asking about my techniques. 3 potential clients had sent messages asking for quotes. Someone had even shared it to a wedding planning group with 15,000 members. My phone rang again around 8 p.m. Another unknown number, but this time I recognized my mother's voice. "Mara, honey, the wedding is over and Brielle is heartbroken. She can barely function. You need to call her and fix this." "No," I said simply. "I really don't." "She's your sister. This is family." "Family doesn't laugh about how embarrassing you are behind your back, Mom. Family doesn't celebrate when you can't make it to important events." My voice was steady, calmer than I'd felt in years. "And family definitely doesn't call your life's work a disaster while they're eating the cake you risked everything to bring them." There was a long pause. We were just venting. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed." "For 3 weeks, Mom. She's been relieved I couldn't come for 3 weeks. That wasn't stress talking, that was honesty." 6 months later, I had to hire my first employee. The Instagram post of Brielle's cake had changed everything, not just the immediate influx of orders, but the confidence it gave me to charge what my work was actually worth. I'd spent years undervaluing myself, accepting tiny margins because I was afraid no one would pay what custom cake artistry was really worth. But seeing hundreds of professional bakers praise my work, seeing potential clients willing to drive hours to place orders, made me realize I'd been selling myself short in more ways than one. My new assistant, Jade, was a recent culinary school graduate who reminded me of myself 10 years ago, hungry, talented, and desperate to prove herself. She noticed the gap in my photo portfolio right away. "You've got birthday cakes, anniversary cakes, graduation cakes," she said, flipping through my marketing materials. "But no wedding section. That's like the biggest market for custom cake artists." I kept decorating the 3-tier engagement party cake I was working on, not looking up. "I don't do weddings anymore." "But that cake on your Instagram, the one that got you all this attention, wasn't that a wedding cake? It's gorgeous. That was the last one I'll ever make. The family attempts at reconciliation had continued sporadically over those months. Birthday cards appeared in my mailbox. My birthday had passed without acknowledgement for 3 years running. But suddenly, they remembered. Christmas brought a package from Mom with a note. "We miss you. Family forgives." I donated the contents to charity without opening the individual gifts. Brielle tried a different approach in February, sending me a long, handwritten letter that arrived with no return address. She'd moved to Seattle with her new husband, she wrote. They were happy, but she thought about our fight every day. She was sorry for what she'd said, sorry for laughing, sorry for making me feel unwelcome. "I was trying to impress people who don't even matter to me now," she wrote. "I lost my sister to look cool in front of Courtney and some bridesmaids I barely talk to anymore. Please give me a chance to make this right." I read the letter twice, sitting in my expanded kitchen with orders for 12 custom cakes spread across my planning table. For a moment, I felt that familiar tug of guilt, that voice that had spent 32 years telling me to be the bigger person, to put family first, to forgive and forget because that's what good sisters do. Then I looked around at everything I'd built in 6 months of not seeking anyone's approval. My business was thriving. I'd started dating Marcus, a food photographer who'd initially come to shoot my cakes for a magazine feature and stayed because he was fascinated by watching me work. I slept through the night without anxiety. I woke up excited about my day instead of dreading it. I folded Brielle's letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't answer it either. 3 years later, I was featured on the cover of Artisan Baker magazine with the headline, "From Small Town to Sweet Success: How One Baker Built an Empire on Authenticity." The photo shoot happened in my new commercial kitchen space, 1,500 square feet with professional equipment and a team of 6 employees. Marcus had shot the cover photo, capturing me putting finishing touches on a 5-tier masterpiece that would feed 300 people at a corporate event. The article mentioned my signature style, my rapid rise in the industry, and my decision to focus exclusively on celebration cakes while avoiding the wedding market. "I found my niche by understanding my values," I was quoted as saying. "Sometimes saying no to certain opportunities opens doors to better ones." What the article didn't mention was the phone call I'd received the week before the magazine hit stands. Dad's voice, older and more tired than I remembered. "Mara, your mother's in the hospital. Heart attack. She's asking for you." I sat in my office, looking out at my team working through their afternoon orders, and felt that familiar knot in my stomach. The one that used to control every decision I made. "Is she stable?" I asked. "Yes, but she's scared. We're all scared. This family has been broken for 3 years because of one bad night. Isn't it time? Dad, I'm sorry Mom is sick. I genuinely am. But one bad night didn't break this family. One bad night just revealed what was already broken." I heard him sigh. "She regrets what happened. We all do." "I know you do. But regret isn't the same as understanding. If Mom gets better, and I hope she does, maybe she'll spend some time thinking about why her daughter felt like she had to cut contact with her entire family to feel good about herself." The conversation ended quietly, without anger this time. I sent flowers to the hospital with a card that read simply, "Wishing you a full recovery." I didn't visit. Mom did recover, and I was glad. 3 months later, Jade brought me a wedding magazine that featured a 2-page spread about unique family involvement in wedding planning. There was a photo of Brielle, now visibly pregnant, standing next to an elaborate dessert table. "My sister's actually a professional baker," the caption quoted her saying, "but we chose to go with a different approach for our vow renewal. Sometimes family businesses and family celebrations are better kept separate." I stared at that quote for a long time. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't bring herself to say what had really happened. She'd rewritten history into something more palatable, where I was the sister who chose not to participate, rather than the sister who'd been humiliated and driven away. "You okay?" Jade asked, noticing my expression. I closed the magazine and smiled. "Yeah, actually, I'm better than okay. Today, 5 years after that snowy night at the Grand Vista, I'm sitting in my expanded bakery writing this story. Marcus is across from me editing photos for our upcoming cookbook. Yes, we got married 2 years ago in a small ceremony surrounded by the people who actually show up for us. Jade is now my business partner, and we employ 12 people who feel more like family than my actual family ever did. The success still amazes me sometimes. We have a 6-month waiting list for custom orders. Food Network featured us twice. I've been invited to teach master classes in Paris and Tokyo. None of that would have happened if I'd stayed small, stayed quiet, stayed grateful for scraps of conditional love. Yesterday, I got a text from an unknown number. "Mara, this is Brielle. I'm divorcing Daniel and moving back home. I know it's been years, but I really need my sister right now. Please call me." I showed it to Marcus, who just shook his head and handed me my phone back. "Your choice," he said simply. He never tells me what to do about my family, but he's seen me build this beautiful life without them. I thought about that scared, exhausted woman who drove through a blizzard 5 years ago, desperate to prove she mattered to people who'd already decided she didn't. I thought about the cake I'd left on that table, how they'd eaten it and praised it only after I was gone, how even now Brielle can't admit what really happened that night. Here's what I've learned. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. When someone tells you that you're embarrassing, that they're relieved when you can't make it, that your life's work is a disaster, that's not stress talking. That's truth they normally keep hidden. I deleted Brielle's message without responding, not out of anger anymore, but out of self-preservation. I've built something beautiful from the ashes of that humiliation, and I'm not going back to being small for anyone. My team is here, laughing over lunch. Marcus is planning our anniversary trip to Italy. 3 different brides-to-be called this morning wanting to book consultations for celebration cakes. Not wedding cakes, because I still don't do those, but engagement parties and bridal showers where the focus is on joy instead of perfection. That night 5 years ago, I thought I was losing my family. What I actually lost was the need to shrink myself to fit into spaces where I wasn't truly welcome. What I gained was everything else. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who make you feel like you're not enough, even if they're family, especially if they're family. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from.